Abraham George is directeur kerkmobilisatie van IGM. Abraham maakt zich boos over mensenhandel. Mensenhandel is tegenwoordig een van de grootste en meest winstgevende illegale industrieën wereldwijd. Daarom spreekt hij vandaag over de vraag: wie lijden onder economische systemen?
The fact that we live in a world of great poverty is undeniable. The fact that we live in a world that is characterized by unjust and unfair economic systems is undeniable as well. There are today more than 3 billion people who live in poverty, which means on less than $2.50 a day. About half of that live in what would only be called abject poverty, which is $1.25 a day. There are about 1 billion children who live in poverty today. There are about 22,000 children who die every day of poverty. But we all know this, don't we? And you often wonder why. Of course, there are lots and lots of theories and arguments and answers that you can give to that question. Pope Francis said last year that perhaps it is because we have constructed for ourselves an economic system that has removed the human person from the center and put in its place the god of money. We live in a world that is characterized by greed and avarice and the issues of the dignity of human being and all of that. Look at the disparity of wealth. I come from the United States, and in the US, a recent study found that the top 20% of the households own 84% of the nation's wealth. And the bottom 40% of the households together own a paltry 0.3% of the nation's wealth. And you wonder why. I do not want to go into the arguments of what and why these systems were created and how they came about. What I instead want to do today is to present to you 3 individuals who represent folks that bear the brunt of this poverty and these economic systems that we are talking about. And I want to offer to you today perhaps one reason why all of the billions of dollars of aid and all of the assistance and all the work that has gone into alleviating poverty has continued to not deliver the way we have expected all of that to deliver. And all I want to do today is to perhaps help facilitate that conversation in your hearts and in your minds for something for you to go back with, to chew on. So let me introduce you to those 3 people. If you can put that picture up, the first picture. This is Aguirre. Aguirre, I know it's a tongue twister for all of you, it comes naturally to me. I've been trying a lot of tongue twisters with your names over the last few days. Aguirre and his wife Lakshmi and their teenage daughter Vaneshwari live in a South Indian village, and they live by sort of hand to mouth, as they say. They make ends meet. He does construction jobs and odd jobs here and there, and they make ends meet. One particular season in their lives, they had to do a cultural festival for their teenage daughter that required some money. They didn't have that money, so they go to a money lender and take a loan, about $200 that he promises to pay back, but he soon discovers that he does not have the capacity to pay back the loan. And so he becomes desperate and anxious, And the moneylender comes to him and offers him a way out. And he says, if you come, bring your family with you, and come and work in the brick kiln that I own, you can pay your debt off, and all will be good. So he takes that, what seemed to be a very genuine, generous offer, and he moves with his wife and his teenage daughter into the brick kiln. And as soon as he reaches there, he discovers that something is not quite right. He and his wife and his daughter are now made to work 16, 18-hour days, baking brick in the heat and the humidity of South India, and are locked away in the night into their little shack, not even allowed to use a restroom. If they had to go away to attend a family function in their village far away, they had to leave their teenage daughter back with the moneylender as a surety that they will return. They were now perpetual slaves. Meet my other person that I want to introduce to you. This is Alyssa. Alyssa is 14 years old, and Alyssa has lived all her life hiding from her father. She has never known her mother, never was close to the father, so she has lived always in friends' houses and strangers' houses and by the streets. And about as she was getting into her teenage years, she decides that she needs to get a job and take care of herself. And her older sister suggests that she work in a bar as a waitress. She goes to the bar. She is hired quickly in a very expensive area of Manila City in Philippines. And she starts working only to realize that she is not a waitress. But instead, she is pimped out 12 times, 10 times a day to strangers and customers in the back room for $16 a piece. Grandma Benedetta is my third person that I want to introduce. Not this one, another picture. Not this. Well, this will do. The lady there on my right, the old lady in the yellow dress, is Grandma Benedetta. Grandma Benedetta is 70 years old. She lives in northern Uganda, and she remembers very well in 1996 when the Lord's Resistance Army was closing in on her village, how she led her large family away back in the middle of the night on foot through the scrubby brush and finds refuge in a refugee camp, and that was her home for 12 years. When Joseph Kony and his men began leaving, villagers started filtering back into their villages. Grandma Benedetta leads her family back into the village, only to discover that her land lay fallow and her house was all in disrepair, but she had a home, she had a place to return to, so she was happy about it. And within a few months of her return, she begins to realize that there was another danger looming just outside her boundary. There were men in the village, thugs essentially, who were lurking around the property with machetes and spears in hand, trying to move this old lady out of her land and to claim her land. That land is all that Grandma Benedetta had to feed herself and her family and her grandchildren. She is once again rendered hopeless, and she once again leaves in the middle of the night with her family in tow, running for shelter and cover. You question today why I would give you these stories when we are talking about economic systems and unjust economic systems. And the reason is very simple. The reason I'm presenting to you these people and these faces to you is because these are the people that bear the brunt of the unjust economic systems that we are talking about. There is a violence that plagues our society today that undercuts and destroys every other effort to fix a broken system. There is an underlying current of common everyday violence. Think about it. What use is a medical clinic if Aguirre and his wife and his teenage daughter cannot get out of the brick kiln where they're locked away? What use is a school building if the little girl who has to walk to the school is not sure she'll make it to the school in the morning, or she will get caught somewhere along the way and be raped? What use are farm tools and agriculture and high-yield seeds if Grandma Benedetta does not have access to her land? You see, there is this plague that destroys every other effort that is placed in repairing and fixing economic systems and alleviating poverty. There is a plague of gender violence today that plagues our world today. There was a study done by World Bank, and it found that women between the ages of 15 and 44 will suffer more because of their gender as women, more than car accidents and cancer and malaria and war crimes all combined. There is an incredible amount of slavery and bonded labor in the world today. Depending on the statistics that you look at, there are anywhere from 28 million to 45 million people in slavery today. There was a study done that found out that the police, instead of protecting the poor, actually persecutes the poor, and the poor run from the police and not to the police. There is increasing levels of land theft happening in our world today that we are often unaware of, because it is these men and women that suffer that. There are millions of people being driven away from their lands. And I want to posit to you today, Netherlands, that it is the common everyday violence that undercuts all other efforts to fix it. And it is time that you and I begin to take note of that. I'm not saying, I want to make it clear, that all of those other efforts are pointless or futile. What I am presenting to you today is what we have recognized as an organization. And by the way, may I put this little plug, shameless plug here, for a book that is in the bookstore. Look for Locust Effect, written by Gary Haugen. He's the founder of International Justice Mission, the organization that I work for. We have found that it is this ordinary, everyday violence that undercuts all other efforts to better our society. But all is not without hope. Let me quickly give you a hopeful picture as well. If you can show me that picture of the three Indian, that's Tirthagiri and his family. Look at the smiles on their faces. They have been rescued. They are no longer slaves. They have received what they're holding in their hands is a government release certificate, which declares them to be debt-free, and it promises them about $400 worth of resettlement money from the government, and they are free people today. And that other beautiful girl, the picture that you showed after this, that's Alyssa. She is free. She is not being raped and abused by strangers on multiple times a day. But she is rescued along with 18 people we rescued on one particular raid. She was one of them. And she has completed high school and is working as a real waitress, saving money, and wants to do things and do shopping. I was saying yesterday, she probably wants to buy lipstick and clothes and shoes and, bags. I have a 17-year-old. I know what they do. So all is not without hope. And the Grandma Benedetta's picture, the family, that's a post-rescue picture. She lives on her land today, and she has hope. So there is hope, but it is time for us to begin to realize that this ordinary, everyday violence is what undercuts all of that. Now, in every transformation of every economic system, time is running away, and I'm trying to make this quick. There are some common denominators in society, and I wonder which of those common denominators you will identify yourself with. In every transformation of economic systems and societies, there are brave activists who rise up and raise up their voices. There are public officials, lawyers, policemen, judges, prosecutors, all of that, who raise up their voices and use their influence. There are men in business who use their leverage and influence to make a difference. There are faith leaders who raise up their voices and make a difference. So I am quite sure that each one of us today will fit into one or two of those categories. But what should you do as a church in Netherlands? Let me close with this. There are 3 or 4 things that you can do. 1, I said this yesterday in a session 2, pray. Join us in prayer. Let's all pray that God will open doors and opportunities for us to make a difference. 2, Be the prophetic voice of transformation in the society that you're in communities that you're in places of influences that God has placed you in. 3, keep hope alive. Let not the magnitude of the issue that we face and the limitness of your capacity drive you into some sort of a paralysis. But keep hope alive. Keep hope alive that justice will come, because we serve a God who's a God of justice and righteousness. And 4, get engaged in any and every opportunity that you can find. Thank you.